This week, Doug White joins us. We're going to talk about security literacy in the digital age and then some stories. Opportunity, not failure. That's why people pivot. How do you design an addictive product? How do you get out of the meeting that you know is going to waste your time? And in the news, Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet. Wow, FANG is at it this week, and Cisco rounds it out. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by, do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hey, everybody, and welcome. It's Business Security Weekly. This is episode 71. It's filmed live, January 26, 2018. I'm in the Sand Studio down here in Myrtle Beach, but I know that my co-host Doug White is up in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. This is the program. We're taking a look at the business of security to figure out how to improve the security of business. We're going to talk about leadership, communication, innovation, what it takes to be successful. And I'm glad that you're here with us. And in the studio, probably warm but cold outside, is joining me this week, Doug White, filling in for the venerable Paul. Doug, welcome.
Look, I get to sit at Paul's desk. It's like, well, I don't want to touch Paul's microphone, so I'm staying away from it.
keep back a little bit, right?
Yeah, you
look great, though.
I know
the
studio has transformed from the horrible, awful hovel that it was, before, to this like almost professional looking thing now. It's just like, I'm surprised they still let me in.
Yeah, it's a good point. They let me in too, and I don't know why. But like you, I don't touch too much when I'm there, and I seem to do all right. And I'll be back next week. And one of these days, I need to find time to get into the studio to be part of Secure Digital Life with you.
I know.
Doug, you are the person on our network that you've done all the shows. Like if we gave out merit badges, your sash would be full.
Yeah,
So,
it is. I've got all the ones, including like talking to Girl Scouts or whatever. But
yeah. Well, there you go. Someone has to do it. Let me do a quick announcement. Hopefully you guys caught the great interview we did with JJ Manella last week. We talked about mindfulness and leadership and guiding change, and she and others are going to be at InfoSec World. It's this March 19th to 21st of 2018, so it's coming up soon. It'll be at Lake Buena Vista, Florida. That's the nice way of saying Disney. Security Weekly subscribers, you can save 15% off InfoSec World 2018, the main conference or the World Pass. Just use the code OS18-SW. OS18-SW. And in addition to our friends JJ, you can catch talks from Adrian Sanabria, Diana Kelly, Ed Moyle, Joseph Zacharias, Mark Arnold, Summer Fowler, a bunch of others. Paul and crew will be there, and there's a rumor I'll be there. We'll see as that goes. So, Doug, our topic today, and this came up, you and I were chatting about this over email. I kind of dubbed it security literacy in the digital age. You're our host of Secure Digital Life, but what we were talking about was there's a number of people today that are in positions where security matters, where security has an impact. And if they get a chance to talk about it, sometimes it's not a false front. They'll say, oh, I didn't think of it that way, or I didn't realize, or wait, I have to think about security now too? So I kind of dubbed that the security literacy, but how do you look at it, and how often are you running into this challenge?
Well, as a consultant, I run into it all the time because, you go out in the marketplace, and as a consultant, I often end up talking to boards, judges, law enforcement, all this kind of people. And, they're suddenly faced with this problem of dealing with this thing that we know very well, and we're a lot like the medical community in the sense that we have this very specialized task that we do, and unfortunately for corporate leaders, C-level people and whatever, they suddenly have to also deal with thoracic surgery as a part of their job, and they don't know anything about thoracic surgery. So pretty much continually, as somebody reads about a new issue, I end up explaining it to someone because they're saying, I read about this. Does it affect our company? And what should I be doing about it? And you wish there was this nice little answer that says, well, you push this button right here and everything works fine. But that's not how it is. And it's very complex. It's very esoteric. They end up dealing with IT people and programmers and security professionals who have an endless litany of verbiage that's very unique to their field that they love to use. And it is very confusing when you're a manager or a C-level or whatever, and you step back and all of a sudden you're talking to somebody and they're talking about Cisco and firewalls and, did you realize that port 23 TCP is open on your firewall? And they're going, I heard the word firewall. That's all I know.
Right.
And it's tough.
And as I'm listening to you too, I think about 20 years ago, if you were the security person, that meant you did it all. Today, being a security person means you probably have a very small slice of that pie and a very deep and a very specialized knowledge on it. 20 years ago, we talk about security and they'd say, it hasn't happened here. It won't happen here. I'm not even going to worry about it. Now, I think people, I keep seeing people suggest cybersecurity is not in the boardroom. Cybersecurity is not talked about. And I don't agree. When I'm working with executives, they care. It's kind of like you said. They say, okay, well, I read it. These are the things we're doing. What do I need to know? What do I need to care about? And so I think there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect here in that people don't care. I think they care. It's that they don't know what to ask. They don't know how to ask it. They don't have that basic literacy. Is that? Do you think that's a good way to think about it? And as a background, I've debated this for years. Is there a distinction between literacy and fluency? And I kind of look at the literacy as that basic knowledge, that basic know-how. It's the confidence of the knowledge. It's not the I heard about it one time, like I'm good. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Whereas the fluency is knowing what to do in the right situation, knowing how to apply it. I kind of feel like if we could just improve literacy, we'd be better off. But what do you think?
I completely agree, and I think you're right. You're right on the money with that. I really like when I try to explain it. I like to compare it to medicine a lot because I think it's a lot like that. If you go back. If all your employees start having heart attacks, a good executive is going to be someone who says, why are our employees having heart attacks? Now, a thoracic surgeon may have a very involved explanation of how to stop people from having heart attacks or how to cure them, or a doctor or whatever. But that executive doesn't really want that grim detail. They want to know, well, we should stop serving, pork sandwiches in the cafeteria. That's causing the heart attacks. And that's really what they want to know. And unfortunately, the security nomenclature hasn't quite gotten there yet, that literacy piece you're talking about. Because what's happened is because there's this esoteric community, and for so long, and you and I have both been there, I almost got fired from a job once where I worked because we came in showing them vulnerabilities in the mainframe. And they said, just documenting that ought to be a crime, because that just invites people to take advantage of it. And, I mean, yeah, you laugh, but I mean, they were really like, we ought to fire you right now for doing this. And I was like, why? We're just trying to fix these problems. And they're like, those problems are not going to happen unless you write them down and make it easy for people to take advantage of. And I'm like, so you lock your car, right? People will learn this. But for a long time, technology was considered the realm of nerds. And it was only going to be about nerds, and that there was not this big community of people who were targeting you. That's changed, but the attitude has not. And until those upper echelons sort of roll over and become, more aware of the literacy of it, they're able to talk about it, they're able to understand what the terminology is. It's very difficult because they're sitting there looking at this incredibly detailed nomenclature that they don't understand. And then, they quickly drop back into that won't happen here, I hope. So we'll just let it go.
I want to point out something interesting, too, because for the last 20 years, I've always looked at where do we find the right analogies for this. And I, like you, I keep coming back to looking at the medical community because there's a broad level of stuff, right? We know things like brush your teeth and, catch your cough, wash your hands, and, drink water. Like there's basics. And with
Don't use Paul's
kids,
microphone.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, see, that's an advanced level. That's advanced.
Oh, okay.
And I'm glad you got the memo. So that's good. Your body thanks you for that. You'll be better off. But as we look at each of those pieces, I've got kids in various. We've got 4 kids. I've got 3 in 3 different schools right now. But it's interesting because we're starting at kindergarten. They're learning about the body. They're learning about the heart. They're learning about lungs. So to your point, they're not a thoracic surgeon, but they're starting to understand some of these things. We're not doing the equivalent yet when it comes to anything around digital technology, let alone security. So my question then comes back to, what do people need to know? Like, how do we start? It feels like at some level we need to make some of these changes in the schools, and you're a professor, and so you're working with people when they get out of the high school and they're figuring these things out. Where do we start? Do we start with business leaders and because they have a need, it propagates down? Or do we try to push it into the schools? Do we try to do a little bit of everything? Where do we start to tackle this challenge and increase the literacy overall?
I think you have to push it in both directions. And I mean, it's always going to be difficult to talk to people that never have any experience with something. I mean, just like I'm sure that if you go back into the 18th century, there were people saying these doctors are a bunch of idiots. I don't trust them. I'm just going to, I'll saw my own leg off. But as we push this down to the schools, and I've seen that at the university level, as we push this down into high schools, so Cyber Patriot, which is such a good program, started educating people that are interested in it. But we also have to expand that to where other people are aware of it. But the good thing is this stuff, the fact that the internet is so pervasive in our lives means that when you read about your thermostat getting hacked at your house, people start to try to read up on it. They try to find out. So we have to establish a body of knowledge that's available to people that is not super intense. And one of the problems in the security community is always everybody was a lot like doctors were. And, when an executive comes to you and they say, what is this? And they're looking through the microscope and you go, oh, man, look at those babies. They'll eat you alive. That doesn't work. So we have to find a way to get that nomenclature to them so that people are aware of this stuff. And it is happening, but it has to go up and it has to go down. Sometimes it only goes up through time. So you see that kind of thing start to roll over. And you see leadership coming up that are now people that are my age or whatever, and they've been exposed to technology for a long time, so they're more comfortable with it. Other people, it's difficult to sell an executive who never uses. I mean, I've dealt with executives and judges who don't use computers. They don't want one around. They don't have a phone. It's just like, I don't like technology. That's a tough sell. But people that are a little more comfortable with it are aware of the problems. They see the scams. They get concerned. They may know what malware is because they've read about it or they're worried about it. And it's a lot easier to sell an executive on that when they say, oh, yeah, I got hit with that at home, and you go, yeah, exactly. So you don't want the company to get hit with that because it's going to cost you $1 billion.
It's interesting you bring that up. One of the things in the years where I used to consult with people talking about awareness programs, I'd always say, start with the stuff they care about. So 2 quick examples, and then I want to talk about what you're doing with Secure Digital Life. I used to say to people, if you want to teach your kids about how to do social media better, let them teach you first. And you get a lot of puzzled looks. And I'd say, well, you can go lecture them, but as a parent of 2 teens, I can tell you that doesn't work very well. Or you can flip it around and ask them. So well, you guys tell me, what can you learn about me? What can you figure out? And as they start telling you everything you can do, first of all, take notes because they know a lot more than you do. Now you can give them the context that they didn't have, and you get to a much better place. The other thing, and you already said this, was talk about what's going on in their life. Talk about what matters to them. I mean, at work, it's been easy for the last 2-3 decades to say, there's a security team, it's their thing, let them handle it. But now we're starting to realize it doesn't work that way. So that's, I think, you tell us, what was the impetus behind Secure Digital Life? It's one of the newest programs on the network. And I don't know if everybody's gotten a chance to check it out yet, but I love the approach that you take to it. So what kind of got you started by looking at it? And how did you get away from having to call it like Secure Digital Life Weekly or something like that?
Oh, well, I didn't get to name it. Paul named it. So I was told what it was. I was told what it was. I was going to call it, I was going to call it Auto Repair Made Simple. But, Paul was like, maybe this is better. I also had licensed BorgBondage.com, but he didn't like that one. So we went with Secure Digital Life. I don't know where the name came from. We'd have to ask Paul about that, but it's a great name, and it's worked out really well. The idea for it Paul came to me talking about deep dive forensic shows and deep dive shows, and one, I was lazy. So, whenever Paul says, can you do a deep dive forensic show? I'm like, wow, that would be a lot of work. And I was like, what if we did something more entry level? But mostly it came from how often I got asked by people, a judge or a law enforcement officer or a high school teacher, could you explain this in terms that someone can understand that's not an expert? And I started getting the idea that maybe a lot of people watching some of the shows didn't always know everything. Some people do know everything. I mean, all you guys are like, I feel like I'm like the dumbest person over here, which is cool. I like that idea. I learn a lot from being there. But as a sort of country doctor type among all these experts, it's really nice to see what's going on. The problem is people do dive into things and they start talking about blockchains. And a lot of times they'll be talking about really cutting edge stuff because Paul's going to go out and get a guest who's like the most cutting edge person in the industry on that. And they spend all day on it. And a lot of people don't have this just massive background in the field. And one of the things I got called on as a consultant a lot to do was just to explain things to people. I worked for bank presidents who said, look, can you just sit next to me in the board meeting? And this guy's going to present all this stuff about firewalls. I have no idea what he's talking about. Can you translate? I had a judge do that once who said, I've got a case. It involves this. Can you sit and be my expert to explain to me what these things mean in plain English? Because I don't understand all this jargon. And I started thinking, well, maybe there's people out there watching the show who say, I love this stuff. I'm interested in this stuff. And and a lot of us don't know everything about every topic. And it would be great to have a sort of repository of knowledge that a high school teacher could go to and say, I really got asked a question about TCP/IP the other day. I don't know what that means. Could you help me? And and I do this all the time now. I'm able to go watch episode 20. I was telling somebody last night who asked me a question. He said, I really want more about the OSI model. I don't understand it. I'm reading about it. And I said, go watch episode 20 of SDL. And I was like, wouldn't it nice to have a repository of knowledge? And then I try to fill in the background because a lot of times, again, we all start talking about things and it just jumps right into this sort of deep dive. So I like this last couple of weeks, I've been trying to talk about buffer overflows because people want to know about Spectre and Meltdown. Well, if you don't know how a stack overflow works and you don't know how the stack works and you don't know how memory works, it's really hard to understand what Spectre and Meltdown really are. So I've been sort of trying to build up to a show where we can talk about Spectre and Meltdown by filling in all the background so somebody can walk away and go, okay, I think I know what they're talking about now.
I love that. When I was in the studio last week, Paul and I did Enterprise Security Weekly together, and I kind of pointed out that we keep talking about Active Directory security. And I just basically said, I don't think a lot of people understand the way Active Directory works, let alone the way that Active Directory security works. And I think that's one of our challenges in this industry is that it's that substitution of familiarity with a concept with actual knowledge or experience with the concept. And what I love about your approach to it then is to say, okay, let's go take a look at it. Back in the days when I was a CISSP instructor and I had to be very fluent across the entire span of what we did in security, there were classes where you'd come across somebody who had really deep expertise and they take you aside and say, yeah, you got that part wrong. And I'd spend hours working with them to say, okay, teach it to me. But thinking about buffer overflows, frankly, they take time. You've got to sit down and you've got to almost get to the whiteboard and break it down and visualize it and see it. And then once you do, you're like, oh, okay, I got it. I find passwords are the same way, Doug. We talk about passwords all the time. We all hate them. Ask most people how password works. And they start, it nope, it's not encryption. It's hashing. There's a difference. And all of a sudden they're like, wait, what? And so it's so I love the fact that you're doing that. And now are you taking requests? Do we have a tip jar out or something?
Yeah.
Or, are you trying to take a look at what we're covering on the network, or how are you coming up with some of these topics?
All of the above. Viewers write in and send notes and say, Doug, can you do this? I'd really like to know more about it. current issues, things people have talked about in the shows. I get notes from people saying, I was watching a show last night, and they were, in fact, one of the reasons we ended up talking about blockchaining a lot. People said they say blockchaining all the time. I have a vague understanding of what that means. Could you maybe do some shows about it? And whenever I do that, then I have to kind of dissect what it is I want to talk about, because I have to say, well, look how many pieces of jargon went into just talking about what a blockchain is. And it ends up being show after show after show, just because it's like eventually you're going, I really need to explain hexadecimal, because maybe people don't even know what that means. And people don't. And there's so much deep dive stuff that comes out of this, the top of the tree, that goes all the way down into the roots of computer science. And so it's really nice to be able to sit down and try to explain all that stuff. And it makes me think about it too. But yeah, we take requests. We get people telling us, why haven't you covered this? And all of the above. So yeah, it's fun.
So basically, too, what you said is I was lazy, so I tried to go for the easy path, and I've ended up giving myself more possible work than I realized. And so, at some point too, I will try to contribute more to it as well, because I love it. I love being able to give people that base of knowledge. And we've had some of our audience come to us and say, I love what you guys just did on Paul's Security Weekly, or I love this thing you guys just talked about on Enterprise Security Weekly, but I don't really have the background on that. And what we try to take a look at from a network perspective is, well, how do we do that? And what I love then is that when we're talking about that basic security literacy that you would need in the boardroom and stuff, I'm not suggesting everybody sit and go watch it, but if you're a leader today and you're trying to get some of these concepts, we've got that perfect spot for you to get that checked out. But also, you're new to the career. Like it's kind of interesting how those things will start to bubble up, and I look forward to more people checking that out and chat with us about it. We're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna come back. I love having you here, Doug, because we got articles this week. We got some fun stuff, so I'm gonna be curious to see your take on it, and we'll talk through some of that security news that people need to know about. So we'll get them on the innovation front here, and we'll be right back.